All right. We are here talking about trying to make our long-standing internal documentation tools available to people more generally. So, let's talk about successes we've already had. And I mean, first of all, maybe we can just bring up the existing DocuTools with its giant airplane cockpit. And let's talk about, okay, first question. I assume we have function repository people here, yes?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay, so to my mind, this is quite successful, what we've done here. Do other people agree with that? I mean, this tools collection here. Do other people agree?
If your list of tools is small enough that it can be condensed onto a toolbar, then sure. Yes, it's when it gets bigger than that or you need anything more complex that the toolbar becomes not enough.
Fair enough. But okay, but I mean, so starting with a toolbar seems like a good thing.
Yeah, you could certainly have a toolbar that you tear off a palette if you need it. I don't think we even talked about that for this, but maybe it was unrequired.
There are tools whose scope might not be local to just one notebook. There's that kind of issue too.
Right. So this has the same type of thing here. I wouldn't call it subscriptive variables. I would call the subscripts, etc., and have it be a pull down, which can do various things, I would suggest. Anyway.
We had discussed leaving it off for data entirely at one point, but it survived.
Okay. Does anybody know what the status of the standard toolbar for all notebooks is? That presumably is not in 12.1, or I would have seen it.
It's not in 12.1, and it's we have a basic spec for it, but we don't have a design for it. And
you should get this Noah kid to work on that. It's this kind of thing.
Well, I mean, but on the graphic design, because that's the main thing that we're missing right now.
I think it needs, well, okay, so graphic design, has Jeremy looked at it?
I don't know, but it's in Billy's queue, but Billy's queue is pretty large from what we understand.
So why don't, is Parth PMing that?
Yeah.
So he should talk to Jeremy about it, because it seems like it's kind of an important thing.
Okay.
Is it conceivable for 12.1 or is it hopeless?
Hopeless for 12.1.
Okay.
No, there's no way. We haven't even begun implementation for it. So
okay, fine.
No way.
Okay. Okay. What is this?
So obviously this is not designed or anything. What this is, what we're doing for version 1 of these authoring tools is we are taking the front end, the interface, the palette that you see in Workbench currently, which some people on the live stream may be familiar with, and updating the back-end code and making a few adjustments to the palette as necessary. Obviously, the design, I think, could use a little work,
what's our target here? So our target is to let people build pages which can be deployed to the web and deployed in a product. Is that correct?
As a packlet, yeah. And yeah, that's right.
Okay, but let's be very specific about the target, okay? Because the thing has to hang off something. In other words, what are we imagining? So somebody builds a bunch of pages, right? They build function pages, they build guide pages. Mm-hmm. But it's like, where does the tree, where is the root of the tree, so to speak? Where does it hang from? Are they deploying that, for example, in the cloud to a specific URL, and then they have a whole tree of stuff hanging off that URL, or what?
Well, no discussion of these external documentation tools would be complete without talking about the Packlet repository, which is how these are intended to be used primarily. So people are writing this documentation to document their Packlet, and it would be distributed with their Packlet. Perhaps
I don't think that's an adequate answer. I don't think that's adequate. I don't think that's right. I think that people want things which are on the web, visible on the web, independent of whether somebody has the Packlet or not.
Well, sure, and that's what I was going to say next. I assume the Packlet repository will have some web presence, and so you're looking at the maybe each Packlet has a landing page, and that landing page
Okay.
could very well be a guide page.
Okay, so let's be specific here. I mean, let's just as the function repository. So let's look at what the function repository does. Okay, you build one page per function, and when you deploy it, that becomes a cloud page with a URL that you can either have privately or you push it into the public one, right?
I believe you can also create a local page if you want
can.
to.
Yes, you can. You can, which is also useful, right? And so presumably, the goal of these documentation tools is the exact same thing, right? To have the same deployment paths. Is that a fair statement?
No, I don't think that's true, because, or certainly not completely true, because certainly people will want, their Packlets to have search indices and appear in the documentation center like all other documentation.
Okay, so that's where the tree lives. That's how the root of the tree gets attached to other things, which is indeed the topic I wanted, I think an important topic for us to address, right? So what we're doing right now, and which, is, I think, acceptable if not wonderful, is, and again, the problem is, okay, this is a fundamental problem with these kinds of things. If you are the creator of a package of some kind and you want to insert yourself into some place, how do you, like you've got 4 package authors and they all want top slot in where they get inserted in the document, in the root guide page of a user. They're not all going to have top slot.
Well, they're not. I don't think they're going to appear in the top slot, right? They're going to in add-on packages.
Right now, we have this crazy thing, which, by the way, is broken, as we can see here. Right now, we have this, by the way, note, this is broken. Is somebody taking notes of that?
Yeah, I got that.
Thank you. Okay, so this is... Okay, so this
and
is
of course,
and
let me point out, if they have a properly built Packlet, right, then they can select something and hit F1, or they can do question mark on the symbol, and it'll take them right to its ref page, right?
I understand that, but I want to know, where is the root of the tree attached?
Yeah, well, and as I've pointed out in a previous meeting, I think the execution of this thing right now is wanting, but the concept is not broken.
Okay, so right now it's an alphabetical list of installed add-ons, right?
Well,
by the way, we had a really nice
alphabetical, yeah.
We had a really nice version of this that we toned down to this boring style, which was a set of icons, much more visual and interesting.
Okay. Well,
but we just detoned it 10 years ago to this, rather.
Okay. So Roger, that implies, right, that when you provide a Packlet for planting, so to speak, then you have to have a certain kit, like an icon and like a description line and so on.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Exactly.
Which is exactly the kind of page that we have now developed well with the function repository and so on.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the question is, in what garden do these things get planted, right? So one garden is this installed add-ons link from the root guide page. Another one is the palettes, right? Which are right now, I have no idea what all of this stuff is, right? This is right now, again, an alphabetical list of palettes, right?
Yeah. And you see, you have both. You've got DocuTools listed in your add-ons because it is an add-on, and you've got a palette related to it that displays in this menu. That's how our add-ons work.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. Do we believe that we should standardize on, that what would happen is that a Packlet has a name, and that name, for example, becomes a submenu, and by default becomes a submenu in palettes?
Well, so many Packlets only have one palette or maybe 2. It's a little weird to have a zoo of submenus, each of which have only 1 or 2 items.
Fair enough.
I mean,
Well,
it's also worth noting that many packlets have 0 pallets.
Yeah, I was going to point that out. I think that-
sure. So
Yeah,
then
yeah,
we-
but if it's 0, the case is trivial. You just don't put anything there.
Right.
I'm more worried about the 1 and 2 pallet case.
well, I think 1 is fine. You just have the name and the menu.
And by the way, you can choose. This is a thing you can do, and it's documented how to do this. You can choose to to have submenus. You can choose to position things differently, and if you do, it'll throw delimiters around your stuff. That's the only reason that all those things are aggregated is because all the people who've done
Exactly.
that made that choice.
And you know what? I don't think we want to give people that much choice. I think we need to choose something that will work well and have that be the way it works. Because let me just enumerate the cases. I mean, okay, one case that we care about is people building essentially standalone app systems, right? Where somebody is using Wolfram Language, but fundamentally they're building a standalone thing that's going to sing and dance on its own, where we just happen to be the enabling technology. Okay? Those things we are really not providing for. I mean, okay, that's one level. The other level is people are fundamentally using, Wolfram 1 or something, and they've just got a bunch of things installed, and they are, making use of those installations as appropriate, so to speak. And I think that second case is the one that we're primarily addressing right now. There's a separate issue of how we do the pure standalone, because in pure standalone mode, people are going to want it to come up with their Packlet, loaded, and whatever the start page of their Packlet is.
I mean, for the level of standalone that I think that you're talking about, it's not clear to me that this is the sort of thing that one would typically distribute through, what our concept of the Packlet repository.
No, we wouldn't. I don't think so.
Because this is a Packlet that wants to have things to itself. And
right.
And if you have 2 such Packlets, you're going to run into trouble.
It's hopeless. So I mean, look, I think the level, what we should be doing is this: we should be providing for the ability to make standalone apps. Okay, it's its own thing. It's a developer story. You make your own. It's your whole own world when you get one of those, and we can have a marketplace for distributing those, but fundamentally you get one of those and potentially it comes with its own copy of Wolfram Engine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Make sense?
Well, it does make sense, and it all works now. I mean, people are all currently doing this, and we've done it before with our custom
I know,
products.
but okay, so we need a kit for making standalone apps. That's one thing. Then we need the standard way of creating and installing Packlets for people who are using our generic broad spectrum tools like Wolfram 1. Do we agree?
Well, I mean, and that's what I thought was in part the purpose of this meeting. It was to really deal with the second case rather than
no,
first.
I agree. It is. I'm just, and that story of the second case is basically the hyperarchitecture story, because that's what we're talking about there. But that is, there's a separate thing, which is the kit for making standalone apps.
Well, yeah, I mean, hyperarchitecture, I think, encompasses the standalone app case, but
only just. I mean, I think it's more. Okay, fair enough. It's an extension towards that, but I think we should separately imagine a kit for, for doing that. Okay. Brian on our live stream suggests quite sensibly allowing tags for the list to be presented in more than one way. Like, if you have a large number of these, have something which is more like a file browser. I mean, the question is the metaphor for this a file browser? And it probably should be for this thing, right? The list of what things you have installed. Why not have it be a file browser?
Well,
I mean, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that, because...
Well, what I mean by that is, for example, you've got these things and, you can sort them by date, you can sort them by this, etc.
I see.
And possibly, I mean, I don't think it's a short-term problem that people will have so many of these that they can't find them, with obvious criteria, obvious ways of arranging them. I mean, I think most people will have between 0, many people will have 0, a bunch of people will have 1, 2, or 3. And a few people will have.
And if you're talking about finding documentation and being able to organize the things that you care about in documentation, I mean, that's a problem that, can be solved independent of this.
Well, that's an issue of pinning pieces of documentation you care
Yes.
about, which we can absolutely solve.
Yeah.
But I want something which, even if it isn't pinned, because I think most people won't pin it, is reasonable. And I think, look, we just need a better version of this page, possibly with some selectors to I wouldn't worry about that initially. Just put them in alphabetical order. Let people game the aardvark, so to speak, if they really care about that. Does that make sense?
No, I feel like you were going a couple different directions there, but the last thing you said, I think I agreed with.
Okay, fine.
I mean, not that not that I think that extra stuff is a bad idea necessarily, but I also like to ship stuff too. So
yeah, okay. So why don't we get something where basically we will have a Packlet, a page which is a Packlet definition notebook, or something. What are we going to call that? Do we already have such a thing?
There's the purple one I demoed in a live stream.
Oh,
2
that's
weeks
right.
ago.
Okay, so can you show that again, please? Do you have that?
Give me 10 minutes to get my local system right.
Okay. Well, okay, even a screenshot would be useful. Okay, fine. So then we'll have, Bob's purple page.
So is that purple page, just while we're waiting to see it, is that basically, Bob, an interface to a Packlet.info.m file?
Yeah, and it has the buttons for linking different kinds of documentation pages, whether it's a symbol or a guide or whatnot.
While we're waiting on Bob, I had a related question, which is, of course, the palette is only 50% of the process, right? Because that's all well and good for creating the source notebooks, but we also need a way to convert source notebooks into things that are ready to go into the Doc Center. That was part of the Workbench documentation tools. What is the proposal here? That there be another Packlet that you install that you use to build documentation, or?
No, that would be a built-in thing.
That's a point of discussion, and it's actually on the agenda. It's build code distribution. It's right there, the next section. So, I mean, there are, how I see it, we've got a couple options here that each have some pros or cons. I already have, mucked around with letting you build documentation pages from source pages using an API. There's something that actually works now. It takes a little longer than if it were local, of course, but you don't have to mess with calling the right thing. You just give it an open expression, it works.
Hold on. This is really simple. I don't understand. Just like we have this deploy button, which has several different options for where it deploys to, I think we should do the same thing here.
I could
In other
share
words,
if you want.
Well, I mean, on a page-by-page basis, though, well, let's see Bob's thing, and then we'll come back.
Yeah, no. I just want to finish this thought, okay? So what I think we should do, okay, so the question is it page by page? I think you should be able to preview it page by page. I mean, many of the links won't work because you'll probably have a very cross-linked thing there.
Yeah.
Right? So I think there's a previewing function, but I think in terms of just build me a version that works, sorry.
Right, but I don't know that the individual ref page is the right place for that button. Presumably, if we have some sort of Packlet.
Exactly, that's the thing
overview.
Bob was about to show. So why don't we let Bob demo his thing there? Okay.
Right, so this is very similar. The body of it is very much like the existing Packlet info.m instead of the template notebook-like thing in the function. But the idea is that you would be able to pick your kind, and these are just nothing notebooks. But the idea is that this would be something like the function repository notebook, where you can put usage messages and details and options and examples.
Where would you be saving these notebooks you're creating?
So if you notice this thing popped up, obviously this wouldn't be the user-facing design, but my idea was if you haven't deployed anywhere, these notebooks are just sitting here in memory. If you close them, it's a bad idea. We can warn you if you try to close them that you shouldn't. But then when you deploy them, they'll all get bundled up. And
I don't think that's a good idea. People if they're typing a lot of stuff, they want to save. I think what we should do.
I mean, if you want to do that, instead of this, you can do one of these guys, and you could say add doc page, and then it's like a file browser.
Why not do this? Why not when you start one of these up? Why don't you put it in the local object store? Why don't you point it to the local object store? When you say create documentation, why doesn't it create a directory in the local object store?
I mean, why isn't the answer that, this goes wherever, right? It creates a tree wherever I suppose your little page here isn't saved, but why doesn't wherever that thing is saved, it creates a proper, Padlet hierarchy?
Yeah, but that isn't by default saved.
I mean, that is the idea, but that notion of wherever it is saved isn't determined until you use this guy in the function repository and all the resource object stuff.
And this idea of contingent saving based on where one notebook is saved, the other ones follow, seems kind of fraught to me. It seems easier to me that when you create one of these Padlet resource definition notebooks, that the thing starts building. Well, look, okay.
I mean, we could do that. It'd be fine. And then when you deploy it, it copies them all to a different location where it's like a snapshot, and it's deployed and fixed.
I mean,
which kind of makes sense.
Okay, so I'm going to do something I never thought I'd do, but which is actually point out something good about DocuTools, right? But DocuTools has a mode which I have on by default, which when you create a new page, it asks you for the symbol name, and it creates it and saves it immediately to the right place. Why don't I have this mode?
Really? Really? That's possible? How do you do that?
You click the New Page Interactive button at the bottom of the F tab. And I don't know why it's not.
You have to set up your CVS checkout first, but when you do that, you fill it out and it saves it into your CVS checkout.
You need to turn on the scrolling because of I don't know why scroll isn't on by default and why New Page Interactive isn't on by default.
And let's add the fact that not only it places it in the right place, it also fills out some of the metadata on the top, which is as well very useful.
Based on what you fill out.
Clicking the button doesn't do anything for me. Is that because I don't have it set up correctly?
There's no visible. It's not like it shows selected. It's that gray on gray. If you've clicked it once, it did toggle it on, but you do have to set up your CVS directory, which it looks like Bob didn't do, and that's why he's got that.
I see it now. Okay, I'm going to turn this on all my computers. Thank you.
Okay, well,
that's I didn't really understand what that thing does. I think it may exist.
Can I share for a second?
Yeah,
I think the mass confusion here is illustrative of the fact that our DocuTools is not ready to be exposed.
Stephen, it is on by default for you.
There are certain behaviors that Stephen gets by default.
How did you get a blue version 12 icon?
I went in and modified the icons.
Okay, all right, fine.
So I can tell the difference between the stable released version and all my built versions. Right. So new function page. Right. So it asks me the name of the function. So it's going to be Itai's super awesome function.
Yeah, this is what it does for me. Yes.
Right. And so it put up the name, and we go here. It has all the metadata, and it's already saved in the right place. And
yeah, if I had known about this, well, let's just say that this meeting could go on for 2 more hours and it's already worth the time investment for me.
Right. Well, but Roger should probably speak up if this is the feature he exploits or not, because I think there were reasons, and that we didn't just make this default for everything.
I didn't know about it, and I just saved them to the name they need to be saved to. But I assumed that it figured out metadata and so on, whatever it needed.
I use it all the time.
No, I see constant commits from DQA after pages are defuturized of adding missing metadata.
Yep.
Okay, so let me just walk through what that was. Okay, so what you're suggesting is people set up a Packlet, the base of their Packlet repository.
Right.
Okay?
So they have some Git repo, which is their
Yes.
Packlet.
Right. Well, actually, they might want the base for their whole Packlet, their whole personal collection of Packlets. I don't know whether they want it for a specific Packlet, but okay, either way, they set up the base, and then given that, Bob's purple page, whenever you say symbol, it would ask you what's the name of the symbol. You type it in, then it creates a page like we just saw. That seems eminently reasonable to me. I mean, we've been doing that for years.
Well, we've been doing it for system, because that's what we do at Wolfram. We create system functions.
I know, and whenever we have to do it for something other than system, it's a huge mess.
Indeed, and we're talking about other people who will not.
Let's talk about that for a second, okay? So, what happens is you use one of the purple pages. When you start, one of the things that is tricky is the lightweightness or not of starting a project. So, your average IDE, when you say new, it comes up with this whole, well, what are you trying to make? Name the project, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And by the way, those projects presumably go into a default directory. Am I making sense? So we should do the same thing. I mean, that is, if it says, okay, I'm starting a new Packlet, purple page, starting a new Packlet. Presumably, on that purple page, there should be a field there that says, what's the name of this Packlet that you're starting? As soon as you press somehow, see, what's nice with the function repository is I have proto function repository pages in all kinds of random directories.
Yeah, Eclipse does this, where Eclipse really wants you to put all of your projects in one directory, and it really deeply frustrates me, and is part of the reason I don't use Eclipse a lot.
Right.
That's
okay. So then
it's just not how I roll.
I like the idea that the purple notebook can just sort of float, and it can have tentacles reaching all over the place, and then when you hit the deploy button, it packages it all up into a nice layout. And
Well.
Right,
So that I'm good with, but that's different from what Stephen was just.
No,
talking about.
and that's
absolutely
not what
it is.
I don't think that's what I think. That the purple notebook should sit in some particular place for any given Packlet, as defined by a purple notebook. That sits in some particular directory, and then everything associated with that Packlet gets built in that directory by default. So in other words, different Packlets can go in all kinds of different places, but within a single Packlet, you've got a particular directory structure.
Right, and when you say build, let's be careful about our terminology here, because there are two sorts of things we might be referring to. There's all of your source files, your authoring notebooks, and your code that you're authoring and such, and then there's the deployed area. We might want these areas to conventionally be close to one another, but I don't
think so.
But I think that the Packlet info file should be close to the source. Files.
Yes, I agree. I was going to make the same point.
Yes, a Packlet. The typical workflow for a Packlet developer is that you're authoring your Packlet in a layout that mirrors the runtime layout of the Packlet, so that you can run the code and see the behavior of this Packlet live while you're developing it. That's really essential.
Although, of course, that mirror is kind of imperfect. and this is something that, I mean, I deal with not using Workbench, but, where it's like, well, I mean, but what's in my layout is all the authoring notebooks, not the deployed documentation notebooks.
It's not, it doesn't work for docs. It's not.
Okay.
Yeah, and it kind of falls down a little bit for library link stuff too.
Let me make a suggestion. Why not? There's a source tree that is defined by the purple notebook. Okay, it's a directory defined by the purple notebook. It's subdirectories, whatever it is. It's a mirror of a layout. Okay, but it is a source. It's source files in that layout. Okay, then maybe this is a bad idea, but then one possibility is in the local object store. If you say deploy locally, it will deploy everything to the local object store, and hopefully we can be smart and not redeploy things that don't need to be redeployed. And then that is almost transparently equivalent to saying deploy in the cloud or deploy to the public Packlet repository. Do you know what I'm saying? So in other words, you can pre-fly. Okay, you're running the thing, but with source notebooks. Just like when you develop stuff, when we develop stuff, we often look at the source notebooks in DocuTools for a documentation page. And we're quite familiar with seeing the source version of things that doesn't look quite the same as the built version. Although, for example, the function repository is a good example of something where we have managed to make the source version look closer to the built version, which is nice. And it's sufficiently close that you can reasonably guess what it's going to look like.
Right. There are things like tables that look a lot different, but the information's all there and it's understandable.
Yeah, to be fair, some of that's just the time. The source notebooks for documentation, the original vision for built notebooks, I think looked a whole lot closer to the source than they do now. It's just that that's diverged over the years and the source never kept up.
Right. Okay, well, fair enough. So my suggestion would be this. The purple notebook defines a position for a directory structure. If you say, so there are various deployment options, local, cloud, public, right? As soon as you deploy to one of those things, files are copied, hopefully with a minimum of copying because we know creation dates and things like this. And that's how it works. And if you want to run it, in its deployed version, if you want to run it just like in a function repository building thing, if you're trying to run your, as you're developing version of the function, you just run it right there based on, hitting Shift Enter to evaluate the definitions in your function repository notebook. So you do the same thing with the Packlet system, but if you want to run
That's
it,
not going to work.
That
doesn't work. You don't. You might have 50 source files. I mean, you have to have. If you are editing Wolfram Language code, and every time you make one edit, and you want to see the effect of this, you have to build the thing and deploy it into a different directory.
No. Listen. If what you were doing is you've got one function, you need to redefine that function. You just hit Shift Enter in whatever file you were working on. Okay, that's one thing you could do. If you need to build the whole thing, if you need to see how it deploys palettes or something like this.
No. I'm talking about pure Wolfram Language code.
Yes.
What if you have 10 source files of Wolfram Language code?
I understand, but you're editing one of them.
No, the people don't work out of notebooks, and you can't Shift Enter. You have your code in .m files.
Fine. Then in that case, you have a button in the purple, Packlet, control file, so to speak, that says reevaluate, rerun, rerun definitions. And you're not going to get away from that. And by the way,
and when I do this, and I mean, basically, what I have to do is I have to reevaluate everything. I have to have the top level package file open in a notebook, and then I just have to reevaluate it again from scratch.
But by the way, it also would be good to have cleared the definitions, because otherwise you'll get weird, pattern overrun, things.
Well, yes, it would be good, but
doesn't the Packlet info file have enough information to be able to do that?
No.
I mean, what I think what you're talking about is, how do I unload a package? And that's something that I don't think we've been able to do ever.
You know, Todd, this comes right back to the conflict that you and I were having earlier today, to my extremist view versus your less extremist view.
About include definitions and things like that.
No, it's so we were having this discussion, and you know, and I'm not belittling Todd's view, because both are kind of reasonable viewpoints with upsides and downsides. But
you're the extremist.
Yes, I actually referred to myself as an extremist. But so my notion is that Packlets in the Packlet repository, and so I'm not here talking about a limitation on Packlets generally. I'm talking about a limitation on Packlets which are accepted in the Packlet repository, in our Packlet repository, the community one, that they should have no side effects outside of their designated namespace. And you know, they can burrow as deep as they want inside their own namespace, but they can't do anything, you know, that like redefines system symbols or adds global symbols or anything like that. Not allowed.
Really? Why isn't it a global action to add something to the palettes menu?
So I'm just talking about the Wolfram language view. Yes, you're right. The palettes menu. I mean, you know, we can have, you know, multiple Packlets that have the same name.
Why
palette.
isn't it a global action to add something to $path? $path?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You don't get to do that. You don't get to add $path. Period. Not by virtue of just loading your package. Now, I mean, it might be different if you have a function in your package that does something, maybe, but not by virtue of just loading the package, though. You don't get to do that. And the reason I'm saying that is because once you give that ability to, you give that ability out, now you open up a world where, you know, you have two Packlets, each of which wants to attach their own rules to plus.
Right.
And Todd feels that's a pretty valuable thing, to be able to have Packlets that attach rules to plus. And my feeling is that that world is not.
So why don't we do this? Why don't we? I get both of your points of view.
Yeah.
Okay? Why don't we do this? Why don't we have something where an important declaration for a Packlet, just like it's, you know, for an app, does it look at your location or something, or does it do this or that? Mm-hmm. That you're basically declaring any external actions that the Packlet takes. And so most Packlets, the preferred thing would be a Packlet has no external actions. But, you know, even putting something in the palette menu might be upset.
This sounds kind of Androidish. So Android, when you install applications, has has this security model where, you know, you have to declare all of these, you know, potential, you know, security concern issues that your app does. And so that's open information for people who are installing your app.
Well, it sounds not completely silly, because I mean, you know, It could very well be the case that most of the time people have zero side effect, you know, installations. But even putting something in the palettes menu, somebody might have carefully crafted their palette menu, you know, and they might be very upset that something inserts itself there without, you know, it's like, well, that's a side effect.
Oh, and just to get back to the original reason that I raised this was because you raised the issue of why don't we just have it kind of clear everything and start over from scratch. You can only clear everything if you know what to clear. And if you can make the assumption that everything's in the namespace, then that's a thing you could conceivably do.
So fine. So then we could have a button that says, you know, clear and rerun. We have another button that's, you know, in some kind of pull-downy thing that says just rerun, don't try and clear. Or we have another button that says just clear, don't try and rerun. And then that's in the, you know, in the purple manifest file, so to speak.
I don't think we want this notebook to take over the process of Packlet development, right? I mean, people will develop
Yeah.
Packlets in all sorts of modes, in their favorite editors and IDEs, with a layout, and we want to give them a tool that makes it easier to start one from scratch, say, or to deploy an existing one. But
Fine. This tool is going to give them a bunch of capabilities like rerun the definitions, clear the definitions, and so on. It's hopefully it's sufficiently lightweight that most people will run it, and potentially that it can be provided in an SDK form that can be integrated into IDEs. See what I'm saying? I mean, in other words, if your favorite IDE could have this as a little kit that could have a few buttons that do the key things from the Purple Notebook, we'd be in great shape.
I mean, I will certainly say, my principal experience here is developing GitLink, and there is definitely a level of inconvenience to, every time I make a small change that I basically have to quit and restart the kernel, rerun the Packlet directory add or add Packlet, or whatever that function is called, and then load everything again. I mean, there's obviously. It's not so much that I gave up development, but there is a certain level of inconvenience. Now, that having been said, GitLink, there are extra things involved with unloading and reloading, because there's a library link that potentially has to be unloaded and reloaded.
Right, but okay, so listen. What is wrong with my proposal? In other words, we provide the Purple page and SDK versions of the Purple page that are a convenient way to be the central sort of control point for dealing with your Packlet.
If you try to launch a notebook from an SDK, does it launch desktop? Wolfram Desktop?
Presumably, yeah.
Okay.
Then,
right, we're not getting away from the fact that notebooks are the documentation writing interface.
That is correct. That's correct. And if you really don't like that, you can use them in the cloud or something like this, but it's going to be a notebook. We're not going to rewrite, the whole system for creating, documents, right? And if conceivably one day you can have something where you import Markdown or something. I don't know, but that's a separate problem, not the problem we're solving here, right? People want to write our fully rich, notebook-based documentation. They write it in notebooks, which is a great medium for doing it. So, okay, so back to this again. So then the idea would be the Purple page has, let's see, you save it in a particular directory of your own choice. And that page needs to be saved before you start creating documentation pages. If that page isn't saved, nothing will, it just won't let you create, it'll complain if you try and create a documentation page. Once that's saved, it would be in some directory, and the directory that it's in would have a little miniature version of our directory, distribution directories that would get built in it as you put in documentation pages from that Purple anchor page, so to speak. Then, if you want to really see how this is going to work, you can deploy it locally to the local object store, globally to to your cloud account, blah blah blah.
Say you already have a file, whether it's a documentation notebook or a package file or something, and you want to include it in your new packet. Does that immediately get copied into this directory, or only when you deploy it does it get copied?
I don't know. I mean, the Purple page could have a button that says include this file. Or
Right.
you could just do it yourself. I mean, where the directory is. This is assuming, it's in that directory. Look, the file isn't connected to your Packlet project unless it's mentioned in the Packlet manifest, which is controlled by the Purple page. You see what I'm saying?
But my question is, as soon as something is added to the manifest, is it copied to the directory, or is it just the manifest listed wherever it was?
I would say it probably would be okay for the manifest to list it, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
No, the manifest is not going to point to places. I mean, the Packlet info file is not.
No, the Packlet info file is the manifest. The manifest is hidden in the metadata of the Purple Notebook right now, but it could be just made more transparent.
I think that's going to be very complicated for users. I think the typical workflow is that, this is essential. You want to create a new packlet, so you open up, you create one of these files, one of these purple notebooks, and then you save it some directory. That is going to be the development directory for your packlet.
I know. So Bob is considering the case where you started and you didn't think you were developing a packlet, and you have a bunch of files, and now you want to put them in a packlet area. And so there is an argument that we just say, okay, if you want to do that with our whole manifest system, put them in the same directory. Not too difficult.
Right. Or you're making a new packlet and you realize, oh, I need this stuff from the last one.
Well, that's
you didn't realize you were developing.
That's an issue, right? So that's an issue.
And you don't want a dependency on that other packlet. You just want to copy the
wait a minute. No. You might want both. You might want the
right. Both are reasonable things.
Okay, so fine. So then that you've just argued why it has to be the case that the thing can point to a foreign directory. Now, if you go modify the, if you get rid of the foreign directory, then when you go to deploy the thing, all bets are off, right? But so you can either choose by hand. It's not going to move anything. The only time it's going to move something is when you do a deployment.
Right.
It's either going to say.
It's very inconvenient to have a deployment step just to have a packlet that you can run.
No, we're not saying that. We're not saying that, Todd. We're not saying that.
You're just talking about a manifest.
I'm not.
We're files outside of the directory and have to be assembled to create a functioning packlet.
No,
that is the very definition.
That's not right. That's not right.
Okay.
That's not right. They don't have to be assembled at all, and they're not creating. What you're doing is you have a button in that purple notebook that says, "Run my definitions." Get my packlet ready so that in the session that I am currently using, the packlet is as if loaded. Okay, that's one thing.
Yes.
The second case is deploy it to my local object store so that I have something which when I start a new session, I can just say, I want that packlet, it loads in, it's all packaged properly for me. Those are the two cases.
I want to talk about the first case.
Okay.
Where I want my system to act as if the packlet is installed.
Yep.
This version.
Yep.
How is that going to work if you have a manifest that points to files outside of the packlet?
Because
if your packlet does not have a layout somewhere on disk that represents the actual runtime layout of the packlet, then this step isn't going to work.
No. It is going to work because it's just going to be a button that says run the definitions for this packlet. And it can run the definitions in either a local file or some remote file. I think this is a detail. It's a detail.
Run the definitions is not a suitable way to make a packlet behave as if it's,
Why not?
You might have because you might have palette, or you might have a library, you might have some Java classes, you might have all sorts of resources that are not going to be enabled simply by pressing a button that says run.
Okay, for the time being, let's assume everything gets copied into the directory pointed to by the in which the purple file, which the purple file refers to, the purple page refers to. Okay, I think that's fine. Let's do that. I mean, I think that there's an argument that we might want some remote dependency possibility, but let's not worry about that. If you think that's difficult, let's not worry about that. Okay? Okay, so let's come back to the original topic here, which was, actually, we've got a number of interesting comments on our live stream here. Yes, Ethan is saying he wishes there's a slimmed down version of DocuTools. That is precisely the topic of our meeting. A build tool like CMake or Ant. Well, that's effectively what this packlet thing is trying to do, is it not? I don't know to what extent one can connect. I mean, it's an interesting question. To what extent our release engineering tools, I don't know what we're using, Jenkins and all this. I don't
Ant. It's all Ant under the hood.
Okay.
Jenkins is all Ant. I mean, actual.
Is that the derivative of what used to be Unix makefiles and things, or is that
no? I mean, Ant is a Java build library. So
okay, all right, okay. But anyway, but so it has manifest files, and it puts things in the right places and so on. It would be nice if our stuff could plug into that, so that somebody could build a large system and have it all work using whatever sort of build tools they use. And we are just like you can call Wolfram script from a random shell file, be able to call our Packlet building system from whatever random overall build system they're using.
I mean,
well, you can already do that with Ant. There's already a Packlet task in Ant, and there's a Mathematica, it's called, because it's old, task in Ant as well, though, that you call Wolfram Language from Ant. So we do have tools for calling Wolfram stuff directly from Ant.
And it's worth noting that if you build a Packlet with documentation in Workbench, that documentation is built by launching an Ant by launching an Ant process that does these things that Todd was just talking about, and builds your documentation and indexes it and everything else.
So
I mean, we don't have any CMake integration for this stuff. It's something I've thought a little bit about. I don't know that.
All right, okay. So that's a separate thing, but I think that is an important thing so that people can script these things from essentially the shell. That this is runnable through Wolfram script, for example, or something from the shell. Okay, but let's come back to the original topic here, which is the creation of documentation. Okay, so from the purple page, it has now defined a directory. So it has the notion of, make documentation for a symbol, for example, or in the case of the main part of the purple page, make the shingle that will be the main advertisement for this Packlet in lists of Packlets and so on. Make sense to everybody? Yes.
So I mean, so basically, what we're saying is that the purple page has an interface for that you may open source pages, write your source pages, and that saves them in the right place, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then there is a button in the purple page that will handle building.
Exactly.
Okay.
Building either locally or in the cloud or wherever. Okay. Makes sense to everybody? Anybody not on board with this? Okay, let's continue. Okay, so then the question is, what does it look like? Okay, so building a symbol page, as you say here, the function repository is a reasonable, has a reasonable model for a symbol page.
Well, kind of. I mean, it's at the risk of sounding a little tautological or whatever. The toolbar is good for writing function repository pages. It's what if you want to link things?
Yeah, I understand. That's an issue.
What if you want to tag state of things, right? I mean, when you're doing a Packlet, you've got multiple function pages. Some are current, some are not,
Well, I think what we want to do is the same futurization mechanism. I mean, we've agreed to have an excluded cell mechanism in the function repository, which is the analog of, which is probably the public version of futurization, right?
But you would never futurize a whole page for the function repository, because then why are you doing it, right? Why are you submitting?
So, right. I mean, the mechanisms that we've developed over the last 3 decades, we might as well reuse.
No, I'm not arguing that, but I'm saying
right. So
the function repo thing we have now is all a bunch of tools within the notebook itself, within the template itself. But
right, okay. So
should we be talking about the need for a standalone palette or not? Right.
Okay. Let's.
Sorry, Andre, you're saying that you would never futurize a whole page? I would actually do that.
No, I'm saying I would never futurize a whole function resource page, right?
Yeah, because there's no point.
Not a whole function resource page, but
right.
Yeah, a whole page in a Packlet, I certainly
yes,
would.
Of course.
Yes, and so for that reason, does it make more sense to have those kinds of tools in a standalone palette than within a toolbar?
Not for that, because I think the right way to do that is there's just a check mark at the top. Is this an excluded page? Is it not an excluded page? Whatever for the page.
We don't want to fit the whole palette into the top toolbars.
Wait. That obvious thing is much better to do on the page than in some crazy palette. there should be a menu at the top of the page that says, is this page an active page or is it an excluded page? It's really very simple.
Sure,
Right.
I just
but then
don't
are
want
we
it to turn into
saying-
10 different menus with, yeah.
Right.
Stop worrying about that. We can solve that. There will be palettes that hang around this for doing specialized things. But I think we should try and put most of it into toolbars on the page, most of the common stuff into toolbars on the page, because then we can store state of the page in the state of that toolbar, like is an excluded page or not. Right now, you've raised the question of cross-linking between these pages, right? Okay, the good news is, because everything is in this directory, so one of the issues is, yes, right. I mean, because it's all in one directory, we can do the same auto-linking that we do in our system directories, which is as soon as you have a symbol name, it goes and looks, does that symbol name exist in the directory that, is it in a place on a guide page where it should exist in that directory? And it either becomes a link or it becomes a proto-link if that page doesn't exist and indicates that it's an error because the page isn't linkable. I mean, the symbol isn't linkable yet. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think so, but and there are a number of ways that we could handle intra-packlet linking. And I'm not suggesting that we handle inter-packlet linking, but you might have
you might.
You very well may. And
linking to setting aside inter-packlet linking to system functions is quite handy.
Or linking to, say, package functions, built-in like JLink. If you want to link to a JLink function.
Okay. So
how far do you want to dig?
You give its context, and then you press link, and it turns into the right thing.
So you're saying that you would select something, click a button, and then you get a pop-up that you have to fill out, like a form?
No, not really. I mean, look, here's what I think it should do. I think you type in the name. If it's really obvious where that goes, if it obviously goes to a system function, if somebody's overwriting a system function, you know that because there is that name. Okay, here's what it should do. It has a directory within that packlet, right? It knows the names of functions as documented in that packlet. Okay. Step one, go to those. If it exists there, probably just link to it. Okay. If it doesn't exist there, you got to look in the system context. If it doesn't exist there, you give a little message that says, where is it? And you can fill in the context. If you know it's in the JLink context, then you put JLink backtick thing, and it won't write JLink backtick thing.
Of course,
on your page, it'll do something more elegant than that.
Yeah.
But that's how I would do it. I think it's really straighthtforward. Now,
I think it would also be common thing to think as linking to the packlet and not a symbol within it.
Fine. So right, and similarly with the function repository and things like that, we've got to linking to a function repository function. We've got to have a way to do that.
I mean, and to be clear, some of these things are things that I wish worked right now in DocuTools even.
Exactly. I was just thinking that.
Right. But I mean, so we can make up a thing to make these hyperlinks, just like the new hyperlink dialog has some ability to say what kind of a target is this hyperlink going to. That's what we can do here. If it's obvious what the target is, it can auto-magically, pick the target. If it isn't obvious, it can ask you. And if you want to pick it yourself, have some mechanism for doing that. Okay, so let's keep going here. Guide pages, I mean, we just need a way of making a guide page. I mean, it's as simple as that. And we need a way. So one of the things is the cross-linking of guide pages. And right now, I mean, what we've done for the last however many years is we have a single directory of guide pages, and that's been enough for our whole system. So I think it's going to be enough for people's packlets too. It's a single directory of guide pages. The guide pages have names. You link to the named guide page. And you can, so we have a little bit of fancy footwork to do with renaming of pages. And I think we could repeat that in this system. We simply have a button that says, tools or something, and one of those tools is a renaming tool, and that renaming tool could be local to a particular file, and it just says rename this symbol, and then it goes in and it'll have to figure out, how to set up the renaming. And if it will be a luxury feature to rename that symbol in other files, to go find where where its backlinks are and go rename it in other files. That I would consider to be a luxury, but it would be a nice thing to be able to do.
Well, in general, it would be, the more general version of being able to track down everything is having some method as part of the build step, some kind of linting thing that looks for dead links.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a good idea too, which is what we have in DocuTools. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
But what's in DocuTools, I think, is only on the build side, not on the authoring side. So we get reports out of the build system, but we can't scan a page.
Okay. So one of the short-term things is making guide pages for function repository functions, which is a test run of making guide pages for, and the kind of the idea for that is, for right now, those guide pages will be things that people they can publish in their own cloud accounts. We don't yet have a repository of guide pages for the function repository, although that may come. And we'll have to see what people produce there. But I think it could very well be that people could, for example, link them to their, shingles on Wolfram Community and things like that. The guide page of interesting functions that they've created or other people have created that they use and so on. It reminds me of sort of the early websites that people created where people would say, my convenient, they would have their public facing homepage and then would also have their convenient links on it. But in any case, okay, so a short-term thing is a guide page creation page that will be basically a local, thing like this, right? And that's underway, is it not? And Bob was working on that, is that correct? Or was it Brian who was working on that?
We are both. We're going to collaborate. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's short term. It's not a lot of work's been done, but it's short term. I don't think it'll drag on.
Okay, but so then the question you guys need to come up with, in the guide, in this tab, which things here of this giant list are actually useful.
Yeah,
right?
Probably like the first 6 buttons. That's probably about it, frankly.
Okay. One thing that is important, we've talked about how these links work. When you do refer to something funky like an entity, for instance, you need to make sure that there's a way of saying, I want to reference a weird kind of thing. Which kind of thing is it? Okay, now type it in and it will be tagged correctly.
Yeah, right now it does some guessing and it's not always accurate.
Right. I think we need to give it a way to make sure it can be accurate. And the other thing that goes wrong on guide pages is, detailed formatting of unusual things like /@ being nakedly on a guide page and so on. And we probably need some escape valve for dealing with, literally specified formatting. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay.
Wait. And maybe you guys talked about it and I missed it because I got distracted, but are we really saying we're going to add a file new repository menu item for guide page creation?
Well, we were just about to talk about that.
Okay.
Okay. Well, all right then.
What's wrong with that?
It's too specialized for that prominence in our menu system. I just don't.
It's not that prominent in the menu system. No, I think it's useful because I think, for example, I've been building a guide page for, this physics project thing where, it's a guide page of a bunch of function repository functions together with a bunch of built-in functions. And it is a useful page for me personally and hopefully for other people in due course.
But why wouldn't we have a file new documentation type of thing and then you get the purple one or whatever?
No, because you don't need the purple one. This guide page thing is independent of purpleism, right? It's independent of making a packlet. There's a useful concept of making a guide page that could be just a guide page of system functions. It's just a useful thing to have. It's a useful form of.
Where does it live? Where is it deployed?
You can deploy it. It's the exact same story as all the other deployments. You can deploy it locally. You can deploy it to your cloud account, and we don't yet have.
If you deploy it locally, how do you open it up? How do you bring it up in the help system?
I would assume that what we would do is okay, so we didn't discuss that, but presumably it would attach itself to your to your root guide page.
I'm sorry.
Right,
So
but-
this is documentation for one. Is that what we're talking about here? Bespoke guide page.
Yes,
Yes.
we're talking about that for one case, right? We're talking about.
No, I mean for one person is what I
Yes.
mean.
Right, and
Yes.
outside the context of DocuTools in general, or documentation tools, right? It's I would like a guide page of things I think are cool, and I want it for myself.
Yeah, or you want to put it on the, you want to link it to your community account, or you want to give it to your research group, or you want to, give it to whatever, right?
Bespoke and artisanal, John, in the parlance of our times.
Yeah, to me it seems like it's like taking the favoriting system and saying here you can do more with it, but you have to invest a lot more into it.
No, it's going to be very easy to write these. I mean, the whole point is.
But you have to write it.
Sure, yes, you have to write it.
I don't have to write favorites. I can just click to add something to a favorite.
I know, but the favorites list doesn't give you structure in the way that a guide page does. I mean, I never use these favorites.
I mean, you can get some structure. I mean, web browsers know
how
to
for example,
allow you to organize things in, submenus or whatever. That's
right.
Structure.
So I never use that. I mean, I have a personal homepage which is built from notebooks that is, that has structure that allows me to find things. Because otherwise I have, 200 links and I can never find anything. And yes, I know people do things with favorites. Maybe my life is more complicated than average.
I got 200 links too, but they're organized in my favorites.
Okay, well, fine. Okay. In any case, I think it is useful. We've got this mechanism for guide pages which works well. I think it's important to give people, and we're going to need this anyway, because we're going to need a guide page authoring system for Packlets.
Okay,
so
but why is it a repository item?
It's not. It's not. Why it has to go under there, I don't know. We might find another place to put it. Okay? We might want to rename that top level thing. I don't know. That's not the most important thing right now. And
this is part of what. Yes, I mean, it may just be a name that we can talk about later, but this is part of what confused me earlier because you were referring to it as a repository thing, and I'm thinking, wait, are you publishing this to the function repository site?
So maybe we want a separate tag here that says, documentation items, and it's separate from repository item. So that
I like that better. I mean, because it bothers me that you would have such a guide page thing and not have other documentation types available the same way, which are likely to be just as interesting to people.
Okay, fine.
Where is computational essay going to go?
It would be just on that list somewhere.
Just it isn't under submenu.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, but to emphasize Andre's point, I mean, I could imagine, someone just doing one-off bits of documentation. Maybe, they don't want to publish, to the function resource site.
Maybe they don't even want to publish
something.
Yeah, right. And they don't want to publish to the. They're not even making a function repository item. They just want to make the page that is documenting something completely different. Yeah, I agree. So why not give them that? And it would be modeled directly on the function repository page. The only question is what the pre-flight mechanism is and so on, and how much checking is done. But okay, fine. So let's imagine there's a documentation tab here let's talk about the other types of pages here. Okay, so let's go, there is tutorials. Now,
and somebody asked in the live stream about both tutorials and workflow pages.
Okay. Fine.
But
right.
we are eliding tutorials, right? And that's an internal remnant.
Yes, I understand. But I'm saying for what we are providing for people in the outside world, there's what are we eliding them into? I mean,
eliding them into tech notes and monographs.
Fine.
We do not have a tutorial.
I understand that. I understand. But somebody wants to author a tech note. How do they do it? Right? And that is under the documentation, new file, new documentation. We could perfectly well have a thing that says tech note.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can somebody just give a 10-second overview of the difference between tech notes and monographs?
Okay. Between tech notes and monographs, I was going to say between tech notes and tutorials. A tech note is a tutorial. It is written the exact same way, and it has the same kind of content. It's just a tech note is a tutorial that's not a monograph. Now, the difference between tech note and monograph. I know, but
give examples of a couple of them.
Okay, so the advanced desolved docs, that's a monograph. It goes into
it's like closer to white paper.
Yeah, it's a lot of textbook formulas. It doesn't talk about necessarily just how to use desolved in the Wolfram language. It's what is a differential equation and how do you.
Why does this say tutorial here?
The NDSolve stuff is not converted over, it looks like.
Okay, so there we go. So that's a monograph. Okay, so that's a monograph, and it's big, and this is hundreds of pages long, right? Yeah. A tech note is similar, but it just has a somewhat different format, and it is typically, I don't know, a couple of tens of pages long.
Okay.
And
tech note can have a table of contents like that.
It has a more junior table of contents.
It could have an overview, yeah. I mean, a tech note would be like the image processing, the old image processing tutorials, which are very much here are the image processing functionalities available in the Wolfram language. Here's how you use them.
Or the intro to dynamic, advanced dynamic.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or the jailing docs.
Yeah, the vast number of old tutorials are becoming tech notes. Or vast majority of old tutorials are becoming tech notes. Only a few are monographs.
Okay.
Ethan on our live stream is complaining that something is so ugly. Please use MA Tech. I don't know what's the ugly. Which part is the ugly part? This thing. Yeah, this is kind of ugly. It's too small. Ah, sigh. Brian, that's for you. Really does look kind of ugly. I don't know why it's so small.
Yeah, fine. I mean, that's a style sheet issue, I'm sure.
Dark orange title bar.
And on the earlier, I think he may be referring to the earlier page you were on.
The monograph.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
And that's not actually the current design. That's been refreshed a little bit. It's just not implemented in product yet.
Right, that is quite ugly. I agree. But in any case, I mean, the point of a monograph is it's like a textbook type thing.
Okay.
As opposed to a tech note, which could be something like, how to set up your installation of Unity so that it can interact with Unity Link.
Okay. Well, that was about the 240-second version of the 10-second thing I asked for, but thank you.
Okay, fine. Okay, let's look at the other. What is the M tab? Oh, that's something.
Marketing.
Okay, which, by the way, will also be relevant for people making Packlets for the repository in the end.
Maybe some form of it, but our marketing pages that's what's on the M tab is we probably want something else.
Fair enough. But I mean, those are the things for creating the whole new in version whatever things, right? Okay, so these need some modernization. Where is the workflow pages?
I would not expect any of these other than workflows to get into what we're providing, right?
Yeah, and workflows, I think, are probably beyond the scope of version 1. I mean, look at like the annotation palette. We're talking about some serious stuff. You click that second black button on the workflow pages. Open annotation palette. I mean,
yeah, it's magnificent. I think
it's really cool. It's really cool, but we need to be able to get this packaged up and shipped. And I'm not sure this is maybe a little bit beyond the scope of a version 1.
It depends. If it's already, this was built fairly recently. It's fairly modern. It's possible you can just lift it, pick it up and ship it. It's not clear that this is, it's been pretty widely used within the company. It's not
really. I don't even know how to use it. I'm not aware of any training opportunities on this. It was my understanding that it was a pretty small group of people that was using this.
John, it's done within your group by Chris Carlson.
Yeah. Well,
yes.
Because he was the first one.
Yeah, he wrote that.
And then he taught like one other person, and that's all I know.
Well,
Yeah,
that's a bad
that
sign.
are-
That this pinked up and produced errors to do with B-spline functions. That's not encouraging. That is a bug of some kind. I pressed the big down arrow and produced a B-spline error message.
That's how the arrow is constructed.
Out of
Probably.
Yeah, I
B-splines.
mean,
Yes, I'm sure.
I agree with John. The learning curve for writing workflows is non-trivial, and that's why it not only and like just like you saw, you just clicked the button and it exploded on you. There's some cleaning and some documentation help, our meta documentation.
And that's part of the reason that I never pushed on this, because I was always led to believe, well, it's kind of a tower of stuff right now, and we're trying to clean it up so that it's for
Hey, look at this! Look at this! It's even got documentation for the documentation maker. I mean, I'm telling you, this is pretty well developed stuff, and it may be that we should put it out there, in the world of Packlet repositories, putting this out there as something that people, as a Packlet that people can make use of.
I mean,
seems
maybe
perfectly
start
sensible.
by putting it out there within the company.
It has a learning curve, no question, John. I mean, for example, I've never authored one of these things. I mean, even though I had sort of imagined that I would, it is a little complicated, and you have to actually do it enough to remember. I mean, the results are very nice, but it's like, I mean, right? There's a lot of detail here. Okay. In any case, are there any other documentation types that we should be discussing?
Formats might be something that other people want to document as well in that OTAG.
Ethan, our live stream is saying, publish these workflow tools in wolfram.github.com. It seems sensible to me to do that. I mean, why not do that? It's, if they turn out to be unusable by people, so be it. But it seems to me that they're pretty well developed things.
I mean, but this probably lives on top of DocuTools. Is that right, Brian?
I don't think so. I think this is standalone.
The annotations. Well, I mean, the template is certainly a part of DocuTools. It's certainly the infrastructure underneath this. I'm not saying that it couldn't be decoupled, but it is run from DocuTools, so that there are some assumptions.
Yeah, to understand, as far as GitHub, I'm always a big advocate for putting stuff on GitHub, but you don't want to put stuff on GitHub that people can't figure out how to actually use, how to even install, and so that's when I stop stuff from going on GitHub. It's often about that.
Right.
Another kind of page would be like a top-level Packlet documentation page.
But that's what we talked about, having from the purple page, right?
Well, the body of the purple page right now is basically the Packlet info.m. But
but what we're saying is, I think that purple page should be the central place where you build the shingle for your Packlet.
Right, but I imagined it could launch another type of,
if you want,
documentation page that would define the body of the shingle. If you want to put like a really cool visualization that comes out of your Packlet.
Right, so your point is that, I mean, okay, that's fine. You have two different places. One is the sort of build script part of it, and the other is the shingle part of it.
Right,
that's fine.
And it's basically like another documentation page. That's sort of more marketing.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
Well, so back to the list of O things here. What other things can be created? Like Shadi mentioned formats. You can define your own formats, right?
Yes,
in the code. Can you define your own interpreters, entities? I guess you can do entities, right?
Yes, you absolutely can do entities.
Right,
let's just go down this. But embedding format. Oh gosh, those are. Yeah, I mean, those eventually people will be able to do that. Entity pages. Yes, that one is perfectly reasonable, because that's for an entity store. That's documenting a piece of an entity store.
Sure.
That's something we'll need. Interpreter pages, probably less so immediately, because I don't think that's something that's user addable at this time. External program pages, I don't know, it might be a courtesy to give that to people because they may have external programs that they want to include in this documentation framework. Doesn't seem critical. Device pages, same story. service pages, that framework, I don't know what the status of that framework becoming a repository is. Does anybody know here?
It's ready to be, when we prioritize it, we can make it happen, sort of thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, so what that
but I
will
don't
be
think we, I think
externally-
we want it to be its own repository. We don't want it to be part of the Packlet repository. So I don't think we need that here.
No, but it'll need a way to make documentation pages for it.
Well, but I mean,
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It'll be a service. The service page will be a self-documenting page because they'll have a definition notebook.
Exactly.
So let me amend my original question. What of these things could a person typically develop as part of a Packlet?
Entity store.
Yeah, and I think formats potentially as well.
Yes, I agree. Blockchain pages.
We need a button, invent a cryptocurrency, a new cryptocurrency.
That's gone out of style.
Now a
you
section
push that button, you get a few $1 million, right?
Yeah.
A section that's not here that has been discussed actually very recently that is going to show up soon. Message pages. That's something that people want to document their error messages.
That would be useful.
Something
I mean, there's some things here that are much fancier. Let's just go down this list. Database connection pages. That's really technical and complicated. Format pages. Yes. What is an example page?
Those are featured example pages. Obsolete, should be gone.
Source pages.
That is like data notes, like astronomical data source.
Character pages. Again, not something that's user addable. Is it?
No, it's not.
I mean, except you can point to a piece of Unicode and document a piece of Unicode, but it's not something people care about right now. Indicator pages, that's irrelevant. Fast intro pages and elementary intro, those are both interesting documentation forms. Those are pretty nice. I mean, but again, out of the scope of this discussion. Guides, compiled type pages. C language pages. Wow, that's wild. That's one of those. Net encoder pages.
One of which?
Excel function pages.
I think the C language pages, is that supposed to be, WS. So that's where that is. I've
been looking for it for years.
Yes,
well,
I have.
Actually, we put it. Yeah, you have been looking for it for years. We put it in the last maybe 6 months per your request.
Okay,
and other
good.
people's requests too. But yes, it's in
Thank
there.
you.
Now, it's an important note. Library Link C page also does work, but because Library Link is a Packlet, it doesn't autosave. So.
What is that? What is this for? What is this? I don't understand. Is this relevant to users with their Packlets if they create Library Link components to their Packlets? Or is it not relevant?
Possibly.
Yeah. I mean, it's C functions. You're documenting C functions that may live inside of a library.
I mean, frankly,
it's unlikely.
my view is that the idiomatic way to do this is to wrap a C function in a good Wolfram language interface and document the Wolfram language interface.
Yeah, I would think that was a better.
That's how it is.
Fine. Okay. Anything else we need to go over here?
I think, well, we didn't get to classifier and predictor. Somebody might put one of those in a Packlet. Or is that just like the built-in named ones?
Well, that's how the built-in named ones are defined. But
there's no reason to put that in a Packlet because you can put it in the neural net repository. Right? Is that right? No,
might not
that's
be.
not quite
These
correct.
are the named ones. I don't think we have.
These are the named ones, which you can't add. Okay, never mind.
Right, but I think that is something. Look, the fact is, in the neural net repository, you're putting networks in there. Some of these classifiers have wrapping that goes beyond networks, and there is an argument that we could have a classifier repository that would mostly just typically access the neural net repository unless people have a different way of making a classifier. It's an interesting question. It's a reasonable question. I mean, to be able to have that be user extensible does seem like a reasonable thing. That's a question for Etienne and so on. Go ahead.
An entity in function repository that uses the net model and does what you want it to do, and then that's how it can get documented.
Well, sure, but the question is whether classify of a string should be able to do this, right?
Sure. Okay. Yep.
Okay. Anything else here? Ethan keeps on emphasizing that it would be a good test to take our workflow package and publish it in the Packlet repository and see if it works.
Yeah, I mean, it's and I meant to respond to this earlier, but we got sidetracked. You had said something about the all of this stuff having to be a part of the system. I think if we have a good repository, it doesn't need to be a part of the system at all. It can be the first thing you install if you want to write something as for the repository.
Well, I think the repository, whatever. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we have a path.
I mean, among other things, internally, the DocuTools Packlet updates really super frequently. And it might be nice to if we have a version of that's on the Packlet repository, to be able to track that and even be able to have a changelog for it.
Yes. But we want built-in abilities to create Packlets. We don't want to have people have a meta Packlet to create, have a Packlet to create Packlets. We want to be able to have people just open up the system and start creating Packlets. And
I'm not saying that that's terrible, but I disagree that that's required.
Okay. I think it's highly desirable. I think it's what we should. Whether that under the hood works by operating with some underlying Packlet, that's fine. That's its prerogative. But I think that the
this comes to a larger, more existential disagreement that you and I have. That you kind of want to scour the world and throw everything into the core system, and I'm tend more toward the let's have the core system be able to access everything in the world and make it really easy to extend, but it doesn't have to be inside the core system.
Yeah, every time I try and access something, I was just trying to use the Unity link, for example, right? Which is just it's like, oh, the Unity system doesn't start up. Oh, it crashes on the Windows machine that is the only one I have that's connected to a VR headset because VR stuff doesn't run properly on my Mac. Blah, 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 blah. That's, yeah, anyway.
That sounds like a good reason not to have it in the core system so that it's not crashing your Mathematica every time you open a notebook.
Although that wasn't my takeaway from that. Anyway, sorry, let me see. There was one other point. Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize this point about being able to make SDKs for other IDEs. Is that a real thing? I think it should be a real thing. I mean, just like we're putting.
It depends on the IDE, and I think.
Well, I think for Eclipse. I mean, what I'm saying is, just like we're providing syntax coloring for IDEs, or there's a sophisticated thing done for IntelliJ and so on. Just like we are, providing tools to help with things like syntax coloring, I think we should provide sort of plug-in tools to help external IDEs to be able to make use of the documentation system and so on.
Right, but I think the way to do that is to have, ANT integration and CMake integration so that all the IDEs which speak these common dialects can just
that's fine.
Load those
If that's
tools.
Realistic, that's just fine. I mean, I don't know enough about how these IDEs are set up inside.
Well, Visual Studio speaks CMake, Eclipse speaks CMake, Xcode doesn't.
Someday Apple will figure it out and have Xcode join the game.
Yeah. But Apple really doesn't allow very much automatic integration into Xcode, so.
Right. Wait a minute. Why can't we submit neural nets to the neural net repository? You absolutely can. I mean, I don't know what the state of having. What is the state of having a user accessible definition notebook for the neural net repository?
We need to. Sorry, go ahead, Bradley.
I was going to say we refactored things for the data repository notebook, and so NeuralNet is within reach, but we do need to talk to the machine learning group and see what needs to go in it and so on and so forth.
Fine.
But it should be easier to do now that we've refactored the function repository lessons into the data repository and a more generalized approach.
Sounds good.
Yeah, there are user created nets in there, but it's more of a contact us on the feedback form and let us know you have something sort of process.
Right, but we intended to have and should now have a definition notebook for that.
Yep. But if you have something great and you want us to publish it, just use the contact form and we'll get back to you and make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. All right. Okay, sounds like we have a path forward. Thanks all. Thanks to folks on the live stream. Thank you for your comments.